wheat and so on. What would you say to them?
Oh, they're not helping Kenyans because they bring wheat when we don't need it. When they should bring when we ask them to bring, maybe when we have drought. Or maybe they could be taken to a country like Ethiopia or Somalia, where they don't grow wheat. But when we need it at the right time, they can bring. But not when we are harvesting or when we have a bumper crop. But how do you imagine I'm having a crop, someone brings another crop from outside the country, dumped it here, and I want to harvest. My wheat is not bought. It's not fair at all.
So the EU subsidizes our food exports, and hard-working farmers like Peter suffer. And then, when there's a food shortage a few years down the line, we send more wheat as food aid. Kenyans are good at farming, both crops and livestock. They don't need aid. They need the chance to compete.
When rich countries drop their protectionism, profits can soar. Yet the EU is often unwilling to open its doors to foreign competition. With tariffs, we keep their goods out. With subsidies, we destroy their markets here. We spend half of the entire EU budget on our farmers, the common agricultural policy.
We spend so much on farming that each of our 20 million cows could fly around the world once every year. How can Kenyan dairy or beef farmers possibly compete with that?
But if we allowed Kenya to export them, and if Kenya did away with its restrictions and red tape, Kenya could seriously compete with us.
The two areas where the poorest countries could compete most strongly and so become rich are farming and textiles. But these are precisely the goods in which rich countries refuse to trade freely. The European Union, for example, has 10,794 tariffs, quotas and subsidies to protect our farmers and manufacturers. Imagine the amount of bureaucracy dealing with all that paperwork. If we dropped our subsidies and tariffs, we could massively reduce poverty in Africa. The United Nations has calculated that if we did this, developing countries could make as much as £450 billion a year from exports. That's 14 times more than they receive in aid today. At the present time, the world's wealthiest countries are trying to agree to reduce protectionism. If this happens, it'll make it much easier for poor countries to trade their way to prosperity. But the anti-globalization protesters, however well-intentioned, have given our governments an excuse to back away from these reforms. So today, we all face a choice. Do we lobby our governments against globalization? Or do we campaign against the barriers to globalization that still exist? World poverty is not inevitable. Global capitalism can end that poverty. It has done so wherever it's been given a chance. In Europe, North America, East Asia. The issue at stake in the globalization debate is whether the world's excluded are going to get that same chance.